If you wonder what I'm doing, I'm looking at you. I'm thrilled to be a people watcher. I've learned so much about children and teachers and people by being a people watcher. I'm fascinated to know why we do what we do. My father once said to me, he said, Neil, when you visit a social gathering, he said, make a line for someone who's the least like you. And then you'll find out about the world and people, because most people always go to someone who's like them and therefore limit their experience. I'm a dreamer, and my dream of education being based on values is coming true, as evidenced by the thousands of teachers and schools worldwide that are following the philosophy and practices of values-based education, VBE for short. My aim in this brief moment is to inspire you. Do you like to be inspired? My dream is to inspire you to see the transformational properties that values-based education can do, and to dream with me. If you're a parent, a teacher, a carer, you are heroes because you are sending messages to the future through the children. Here's a picture of my granddaughter, one of my beautiful grandchildren, called Sophie. As you see, she's standing in a strawberry field looking at her mum. Sophie doesn't remember that event. She's now 8 years of age. And when talking to her, she said, what was I doing? Who was I with? But although she doesn't remember it, she has a biographical memory that's locked into her body. It's somatized. It's the same with each one of us. Those early experiences that we have as children are locked into us, but we don't remember them. That is why, my dear friends, that relationships are so important. The relationships you have with young children, go with them to the future. You send positive messages to the future as wonderful people. When I was a very young teacher, I was working with a phenomenal guy called Peter Long. And I was on final teaching practice. And I just watched Peter. And I wanted to know, how could I be a great teacher? And I noticed that he was able to make a connection with young people and form trusting relationships. So I knew that trusting relationships were really important. A few years later, I was visiting Israel with a group of teachers. And we were visiting the memorial to the Holocaust at Yad Vashem. If you go there, you will find a memorial to the children. It's like entering a dark cave, a bit like this room that I'm seeing now. And when your eyes get accustomed, you suddenly are aware of what appears to be thousands of candles being reflected on glass. The only sound that you hear is the sound of the recitation of the children's names who were murdered in the concentration camps. When I left that memorial, I could feel the tears running down my face as I contemplated man's inhumanity to man. I thought, Neil, what is it you could do that could make a difference? Is there some way that we can take hold of the shadow side of humanity and do things different? Is there something that you teachers can do worldwide to change things for the better? I talk to a lot of teachers, and I start asking the questions, well, is education about mathematics, literacy, and all those subjects? Is it about league tables and getting great results? But is there something more important, greater for humanity? I was talking to an audience in Brisbane in Australia, and I said to them, what's the purpose of education? And a guy from the back of the room shouted, hey, it's about social control. That's what it's about. I don't know your view, but my view is that it's about the flourishing of humanity. As much as each one of us can flourish, we ought to be enabled to do that. Aristotle said that education is a moral pursuit in which everybody should flourish. I then started to look for a school. I thought, can there be a school that I could work out some of these ideas? And I found one. And with a great community, we set out to see if we could help children to develop a language of values. I noticed that some children came to school without any understanding of words such as respect or tolerance, whilst others did. So we had a sculpture, which you see. This sculpture is a metaphor. The 5 arms represent the 5 continents of the world, and the young lady is underneath the globe. And that's a metaphor for children of this world holding up the world or letting it drop. I believe our children can hold up the world. I was working with a school in London, and there was a teacher, and she did things differently. She was a values-based teacher, and the head teacher said, something's going on in this classroom. Let's have a piece of it. So the whole school undertook values-based education and transformed learning and behavior. What is values-based education? Values-based education is when you underpin everything in school, the policies, the way you behave, the relationships, everything, with a set of universal, positive human values. There are limiting values, greed, envy, intolerance, and we know that those sort of values make everything spiral down. Whereas if we give children a positive set of values, tolerance, love, justice, altruism, then we give children the tools in which they can form positive relationships with themselves and with other people. There are 7 pillars of values-based education that underpin all the values work. Modeling. I find it's really difficult. Although I've been involved in values a long time, I find modeling them really difficult because I'm, like you, a normal human being. Well, I think I'm normal anyway. Modeling is when you take the values words, but as teachers, as staff, whether you're in a school or a business, you say, how do we model them? That's the difficult part, modeling. If you take a word such as respect, it's easy to say that word, but it means, for instance, that if you follow respect, you cannot shout at children in the school. It's impossible. So modeling is important. The inner curriculum. This is a big wow. Curriculum for me starts with the internal curriculum. The internal curriculum is about the inner world of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and sensations. A values-based school creates the environment for those values that inner curriculum to begin. There are 4 elements of the inner curriculum. First, the wonderful work of interpersonal neurobiology, Dan Siegel's work. That's followed by psychotherapy and the work of Richard Schwartz and the internal family system, very big in the United States and growing around the world. Thirdly, we have all the brilliant educational practices that are rooted in sound knowledge and research and not in political dogma or ideology. And lastly, we have the wisdom of humanity, thousands of years of wisdom And those 4 elements make up this transformational inner curriculum that I invite all teachers and schools around the world to think about. Have your internal curriculum. That is one of my really big dreams, that every school should have that. Reflection. You all know about mindfulness now. I was talking to Emily, a young 7-year-old in a school a week or 2 ago. And I said to her, how do you calm your anger down, Emily? And she did the wisdom cycle. She thought, she went inside, and she said, to stop being angry, I think of peace. Wonderful way of thinking. Atmosphere. The atmosphere of a school should be calm and purposeful. Then we have the curriculum. The curriculum is explicit and implicit. The teaching of the values curriculum should be guided by the words of Goethe, my version. If you take a child as she is, you make her worse. If you take a child as she could be, you make her capable of becoming what she could be. So always aim high. Have these big dreams, and children then do that. Leadership. Everybody in a school should be a leader, but a values-based school only happens if the leaders say, yes, we're going for this. And the ethical vocabulary. The values words give children an ethical vocabulary which leads to what I've termed ethical intelligence, which I think is the most important intelligence for us to develop. Now an experiment. Do you think you're good at modeling values? Nod if you do. Right, let's have an experiment. Here's a lovely teacher from Australia. I think she's brilliant as a values-based teacher. But she's doing something that I always look at everybody to see if I think they're values-based. She has smiling eyes. If you have smiling eyes, you don't carry the cares of the world around with you. You're open, you can make connections, you've got good relationships. Have a look at the person next door to you. Have they got smiling eyes? Have a look. All right, don't make a meal of it. I did that to an audience somewhere in the world, and someone wrote to me and said, oh, by the way, Neil, you might like to know that the person whose eyes I looked into, they just got married. So who knows what I've started today? Carl Rogers said it's important to have unconditional positive regard. As a good teacher, that's what you have with all children. Unconditional positive regard. Let's have a values lesson now. A values lesson on friendship. Can you be a 5-year-old for me? Can you? Now, I've just done a really good lesson for you, and I want you to show me, please, how you would show friendship. Show it to the person sitting next to you. Show me friendship. This is what the children actually do. Yeah. The future. The future. The future is in the hands of students. Like this girl from Aureus School. I was with that student and fellow students a few weeks ago, and I was inspiring them to be values champions. I would like you, each one of you, to be a values champion, because I know together we can make a huge change in the world if we follow values-based education. We know that it forms communicative competence. It helps with relational trust. It develops academic diligence in children. It is the philosophy which actually drives a 21st century curriculum that meets the needs of children all over the world. We live in difficult times. Values-based education develops the atmosphere in which mental health is okay, resilience is developed, and we develop what I call a sense of self. We're able to be responsible for ourselves, which I think is important. So, can you imagine the world if we had a new narrative based on values? Can you imagine our politicians talking to one another using positive values language? That's what we could do. Zoom the messages to the future with our children, and they will create a society in which this world can truly flourish. My dream, and I hope it will be your dream, is to make this huge transformation in the world. Please join me and make this dream come true. Thank you.